as promised, we are going to talk about grades. I'm going to try to keep this short, simple, and sweet. First and foremost, if you have under a 3.0 GPA, just know that right off the bat, it is going to be a difficult, long path for you to get into a PA program. Now, you will see that people will say, oh, I got in with a 2.7, I got this, I got that, and I mean, it is possible, don't get me wrong, it's possible, but to look at somebody who got in with that and say, oh, I should be fine because they got in with the 2.7, so I can get in with a 2.7, you have to remember the competition that you have out there. There are a lot of programs now not requiring a lot of direct patient contact experience, which we'll talk about later, but those programs are going to have a lot of people applying to them, and they're going to have a lot of people applying that have 4.0s and things of that nature. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is that a lot of people that have a 3.7 or 2.7 or whatever when they're getting in, and they're not telling you about the 10,000 hours of direct patient contact experience they had as a medic in the Army. So a lot of the times when you're lacking in one area, you can make up for it in another. So with grades, a lot of people make up for it with direct patient contact experience. Another thing that they do is a lot of programs now are taking into consideration that people may have messed up when they were younger, and they have done a lot better now, so they have an upward trend. So a lot of programs are looking at last 90 hours, 60 hours, 45 hours, and looking at that GPA. So what some of these people who have an overall 2.7 might fail to tell you is that in their last 90 hours they had a 4.0 while they worked, and they have 10,000 hours of direct patient contact experience. So all of these things are things that you need to take into consideration when you're looking at your GPA. One of the things that you might want to do to help your GPA is focus on that upward trend. I tell people to make sure that you balance your course as well. So that means taking at least 2 science classes a semester, making sure you take an intermediate health-related course that's not super difficult, but it's not overly easy, and then take an easy class. Try to work while you're doing it, but if you have to compromise on one thing or another, you do not want to compromise on your grade. So that means if you have to lower your course load in order to survive for a semester because you're working, you know, overtime and crazy hours and all that stuff, then that will be where you want to compromise at. You want to lessen your course load so you don't mess up your grades. Because the way that CASPA works, which is the centralized application system for applying to a majority of the PA programs, they take into consideration every attempt that you take on a class. So they don't do grade forgiveness or any kind of grade substitution. So if you take Chem 1, you fail Chem 1, you take Chem 1 again, and you get an A, that averages out to a C through CASPA. It's not that they say, oh, she took this class, but then she got a better grade, so we're just going to go with the A. They don't do that. Another thing that you want to look at is you want to look at some of the programs that you're applying to. You want to look at programs that focus on those last few hours, the 90, 60, or 45, whatever. You also want to start looking into programs that do not go through CASPA. Programs that do not go through CASPA typically will honor grade forgiveness, meaning if you've taken the class once and you got a poor grade in it and you take it again, normally what they do is they will calculate your GPA with the higher of the 2 grades. So that is something to keep in mind. At this time, the only program that I know of that will recalculate your CASPA GPA is Western in California. That is the only one that I know of, and they had that on their website the last time I checked. But just remember, I've already applied and been accepted, so I haven't had to look into programs lately. I will do that for an upcoming video that I have on programs, but as of right now, I haven't looked at any of the other programs. So as of right now, the last time I looked, Western does recalculate the GPA to take into consideration any classes that you may have retaken. But again, grade point average, very important. It is not the deciding factor or the only factor. No matter what some people will say, you will hear people, you will read where people say, oh, this school is really big on grades, they don't care about anything else. Definitely take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt, because a lot of programs, it's the whole applicant that they look at. I mean, my program is in the top 5 in the country, and I could have swore that my GPA was not going to get me even an interview, and it got me a seat. So it's about the overall applicant. It is not necessarily all about the GPA. The GPA is a very big component, because another thing that you need to keep in mind is that a lot of programs out there are master's programs. And if you looked into master's programs, you notice that you need a 3.0 just to graduate from a master's program, which is very difficult to do if your GPA is already under a 3.0, which is why pretty much every master's program out there requires a 3.0 or higher. Now, there are exceptions to every rule. There are some master's programs out there that allow you to apply with a 2.7, a 2.9, whatever. But the lower the GPA, the lower the requirements, the more people that are going to apply to that program, which means there's more competition per seat. So that is also something that you definitely need to keep into consideration. I applied to a program whose not only were their GPA requirements a little bit lower, but so was the direct patient contact experience, so was the prerequisite requirements. And my application was like 974 out of 3,000. So CASPA really opens up the applicant pool, because it's easier for people to apply that way. And the requirements for the program, the lower the requirements, the more applications they're going to get in. So these are definitely things that you really need to take into consideration when you're looking at your GPA and your overall, I guess, qualifications for a program. Do not apply to a program unless you meet all the requirements. People will disagree with me about that, and that's perfectly fine. People will say, oh, you never know until you try, whatever. My thing is, just like they consider organic chemistry to be a weeder class for med school, those requirements that PA programs post on their website, they're weeder requirements. So a lot of schools, what they do is that GPA minimum that they put up there is the minimum that you have to meet just to have them look at your application. Meaning, if they ask for a 3.0, there are programs out there that if you have a 2.9, they will toss your application. It's plain and simple. I mean, I had a program that required that you write your, you put your GRE scores on your CASPA application, which I didn't do. I figured not all the programs that I applied to required a GRE score. So I was like, well, whatever, I'll just send them my scores. So I sent them my scores separately, but my application still got thrown out as being incomplete because my GRE score was not on the CASPA application. Yeah. So, as I said before, my thing is, you really should try to make sure that your GPA meets that minimum GPA that they're asking for, because you are simply asking to have them toss out your application if it doesn't meet that. Okay, so that's this, and then the next one we're going to talk about prerequisites. So until then, talk to you guys later, alright? Bye.